Okay, so to all who don't really understand what sidereal astrology is or what true astrology is, because in the general term, that's what it is called, true sidereal astrology. What it is it is the actual positioning or keeping track of the actual positioning of where the heavenly bodies or planets are located in the actual backdrop of stars. So, all right, for example, as I explained in a previous video, in tropical astrology, they go by when the spring equinox was in the constellation of Aries. That was the age of Aries, right? So, okay, the present degrees that they give you, telling you, well, all right, your sun is this degree in this particular sign, that was since back at the zenith of the Roman Empire. Okay, those degrees no longer apply today. Since that time, the spring equinox has moved into the constellation of Pisces, and it is now currently around 25 degrees, right? So, if they tell you, well, like I explained in the previous video, if they say that, let me say they tell you that your sun is 24 degrees in Aries, it could actually be 0 degrees in Aries or 30 degrees in Pisces, okay? Because the spring equinox moves backward through the constellations. So from Aries, it moved to Pisces, and from Pisces, it is about to move into Aquarius. Okay? Now, currently, all right, like at present, they would tell you the sun is in Libra. Okay? They would tell you the sun is currently in Libra. And that is incorrect because true sidereal astrology is almost like astronomy. Again, is the exact backdrop where the planet is located to the backdrop of stars. Currently, the sun is actually halfway through the constellation of Virgo. So everybody born within this time period here, currently here, even if you was born back in the 80s, the 70s, you actually a Virgo, basically, right? Because the sun was actually in Virgo when he was born. Now, for who want to argue, well, no, so that only recently changed because propaganda again, because that all that is propaganda, because the degree, the degree changes every 70 or 72 years. Between 70 to 72 years, roughly, the degree has changed. So it's like since the spring equinox left the constellation Aries at the zenith of the Roman Empire, since that it has shifted every 72 years, roughly 1 degree every 72 years. Okay, and that is how it is measured sidereally. Okay, now there are people who are going to debate this and challenge this because we know that a lot of people don't they can't handle the truth of things. People can't handle the truth of things, and everybody already know what they know. So people not going to be comfortable accepting this information. but it is what it is. We are guided and governed by higher laws that we have no control over. We are just a very small, minute part of a large cosmic story being played out. Okay? And we cannot change anything because we have to play it out. This is why, throughout every astrological age, since the end of the so called Great Ice Age, at the end of the Great Ice Age is where we first document the first astrological age, which was the age of Leo. At the time of the age of Leo, mankind was the dominant species on the planet. Okay? Our high intellect, the way our confident, dominant expression was reminiscent of the Leo constellation, the lion. We emulate the lion. That ferocity, that confidence, that vigor, to conquer and rule. And we tread down every single threat that was a threat to us and become the dominant species. This is why at the end of the Great Ice Age, a lot of mankind, we worship the sun because the sun is the ruler of Leo. And this is why from that time and up until the age of Aries, the sun was always a key or a principal factor, right? After the spring equinox moved from the constellation Leo, it moved into the constellation Cancer, which was a period of the rise of a lot of mother goddesses, moon goddesses. You would find like fertility was a thing. This is where we instituted family during that time, the time of the age of Cancer, where the spring equinox was in Cancer. We moved to the from after the age of Cancer, the spring equinox moved to the constellation Gemini, where reading, things like reading, writing, intellectual pursuits became a thing. We understood the duality of existence, things like good and evil, right and wrong. We understood that life was a multifaceted something, right? But the core factor was reading and writing and communicating, right? That was the key factors of that age. The spring equinox moved from the constellation Gemini to the constellation of Taurus. This was where we started documenting things, right? Well, we actually started documenting things at the age of Gemini, but our known history begins at when the spring equinox was in Taurus. Um, Building beauty culture, the divine feminine energy, um, sex, all these things were key factors during that age. What we know as the Bronze Age was actually in the age of Taurus, right? A lot of what we know, the rise of Egypt, all these, these architecture, all the grand architectures all over the world, all these things was during the age of Taurus. The spring equinox moved from the age of Taurus, from the constellation of Taurus to the constellation of Aries. Now, this happened in the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. And this is where we see the collapse of Egypt. And there was a lot of wars and rising and fallings of empires and kingdoms because the age of Aries, which is ruled by Mars, which is war and bloodshed. This is where also a documented time in our history that we know because it was a playing out of the age. As I said, all the ages we played them out to the T. right? And up until the peak of the Roman Empire, there was a lot of war and bloodshed, and there was no real rule of law. You know, you could expect your village or your place to be invaded anytime. There was no international rule of law as we have today. This being because of the current age that we are in, when the spring equinox moved to the constellation of Pisces, where we are currently in, where it is a more romanticized consciousness we have of things. Empathy, um, thinking about the other person. You understand? Hence the reason the two fishes, they jumping out of the water together. That means that its connection is empathy, because we know Pisces is a water constellation. It represents feeling like all the other water constellations. So yeah, it's that feeling, that putting yourself in the other person's shoes, that compassion, that. So these things became amplified in our time. This is why we no longer have things as it was, as we read about in books during the age of Aries, when it was just war and bloodshed and violence, you know and by the way, every age has its ruling planet. Leo is ruled by the sun, Cancer by the moon, Gemini by Mercury, Taurus by Venus, Aries by Mars, and our present age is ruled by Jupiter, which is why we have all these philosophical ideas and all these romanticized ways of thinking, because it's all about finding that connection outside of self to transcend the self, the physical self. And we are heading into an age where that connection will be, how to explain, that connection will be uh, tested, and it will be put to a I can't find the words right now, but yeah, basically it will be that where Jupiter expanded the consciousness in the future age will be limited to the reality of things, basically, in a nutshell. So that's just my little 2 cents here again. I just try not to make the videos too long, right? So again, I'll come every now and again with bits and pieces of information. Until next time.